Thank you all for joining me today. My name is Maury Haber. I'm the Chief Security Officer at BeyondTrust. And what we want to talk about today is a CISO's journey to Zero Trust. As a part of our agenda, I'm going to go over a little bit of introductions about who I am, my background. It'll help you understand the relevance for this presentation and how you can translate it potentially to your organization. We're going to cover a very high-level shifting landscape. Many of you may already be aware of that dissolving perimeter, the remote working, that need to secure access from anywhere. But we'll do that as a reminder to make sure you're comfortable with the setup to the technology and messaging that we're going to be doing. We're then going to get into Zero Trust in a way many of you may not be accustomed to, not only in the definitions, but architectures and methodologies used to actually implement Zero Trust. And I'm going to back that up by what we've done internally, what as a CISO I've done internally at BeyondTrust to make us Zero Trust compliant, what frameworks I've used, what measurements I've used, and what controls are actually applicable to saying, yes, I have workflows that are Zero Trust compliant. And then we'll wrap it up with some BeyondTrust technology. This is important because as a consumer of the products we manufacture, BeyondTrust uses everything we make in our own environment. And that has helped us manage many of the controls for Zero Trust and actually implement it to be successful. So to begin, as I indicated, my name is Maury Haber. I've been in the cybersecurity industry for well over 20 years, 20 of them here at BeyondTrust through a couple of different company names. And I participate in a wide variety of communities. I sit on the executive board for IDSA, which is the Identity Defined Security Alliance, a founding member of the Transparency in Cyber Org, which helps elevate vulnerabilities and risks that people would normally not discuss. But I also write a lot. Actually, I have 6 books under my penmanship, 4 of which are illustrated on the screen, 1 with 2 editions, and then a 6th that is called The Great Power Competition that was co-authored out of the University of South Florida, covering cybersecurity threats for OT technology. I regularly write on Forbes, Secure World, a wide variety of other periodicals. I take what I learn from my peers, from conferences, and help develop strategies to help customers like yourselves better manage the security risks with their environment, or if nothing else, explain complex topics that generally take a lot of time to get into the masses in terms of adoption. So to begin, let's take the attack surface as it is. The statistics speak for themselves. There's a wide variety of threats that are out there, whether they are affecting cloud resources, whether they are increasing vulnerabilities that we've seen in the cloud, or even stupid things like the increase of RDP access available through cloud resources. Many of the changes that we see in terms of the changing landscape of threats have occurred due to the digital transformation of people moving to the cloud, but also due to residual effects of COVID, allowing people to work remotely and needing for those remote workers to have access. The simplest way to have done that is just turn on RDP, right? Turn it on the internet. But that risk and exposure is too great for the average organization to absorb. So technologies that have allowed remote workers to come into the organization, grant them the least amount of privilege, et cetera, are the result of us shifting from everything being on-premise in an office environment with multiple firewalls and traditional network security technologies to being in the cloud and supporting remote workers. Zero Trust is an answer or a methodology to support the security models for those changes. We didn't need it as much when we had a secure office, a secure VLAN, a secure desktop with multiple layers and people working. We could trust the physical security of the person coming in the door is probably the person sitting at that desk. And that type of modeling or that type of additional assurance doesn't exist anymore. Because truly an identity can connect to a computer, connect to the internet, connect to an asset, its resources and data from almost anywhere in the world today. And that's where Zero Trust modeling and frameworks helps us verify at a high confidence the person is who they say they are, and the job that they're doing is what they're supposed to do. And it explains the increasing attack surface, because people that have not adopted that are the ones that are basically committing, or implementing technology that's not so secure. Now, the history of Zero Trust is very important because it is not new. In fact, it's only been new to most people since 2020 when NIST formalized it in the white paper 800-207, and then we started seeing architectures in 1835 from various vendors. It really goes back to 1994 and really highlighted in 2009 from Forrester. The concepts are very interesting because if you start digging into what comes out as the tenets, which we'll speak about later, they really have their foundation in old Rainbow books. And Rainbow books were security manuals produced by the government almost 30 plus years ago on best practices, least privilege, secure access, RBAC models, etc. And what they've done is, in the Zero Trust concept, said, take this piece, take this piece, take this piece, and this is going to be your best bet for securing access no matter where a person is. Now today, we've got that all come together. We've got the NIST frameworks, we've got the DoD strategy guides, and we are now left with figuring out how to take this long history of what Zero Trust was stated as and making it a reality within our own organizations. That's the mainstream adoption we're dealing with today. Now, as I've alluded to, why now? And it is because the traditional moat and castle approach of having security in one place, in one office with multiple firewalls, IPS, IDS, has changed to a perimeterless world. Just as I've loaded this presentation here to do this recording and to present to all of you, I've had to download it from the web. I've had to give it to the speaker, the moderator of the session. They've had to transfer to that notebook. In an on-premise world, that wouldn't happen. I might have even put it on a floppy or burned it on a CD versus the methods that I've had to do to get it here, primarily email or even a cloud-based share. That's the reality we live in today. We are in a true perimeterless world. It's very difficult for a complete ecosystem to operate in an air-gapped network, and in many places it still does for its mission to be accomplished. But for the average user, the average endpoint to operate, it has to have some type of cloud resources, whether that's for antivirus, getting updates, getting patches. It has to connect somewhere, somehow, and at some point, those updates, that communication, that message is coming from the internet. So we are in a perimeterless world, no matter however we want to look at it. That's the source. But we also have to come to the realization that you, me, everybody, bosses, managers, everybody, humans are our weakest link. We are subjected to phishing, vishing, smishing, and all the lack of, all of the variations of the word ishing in terms of modern attack vectors. In fact, yesterday I saw an amazing deepfake video that someone was captured, their boss was captured, and using AI in the middle, a Zoom call was impersonating the person's boss. It was devastating in terms of how realistic it looked and what that boss was asking an employee to do. To be honest with you, most people would have a very difficult time, even through an authorized Zoom session, determining that it truly wasn't the person who it was. So humans are our weakest link. We are going to fall for these types of attacks, and many times it's because people are a little ignorant, or they're a little arrogant, or they don't have the proper training, or they don't believe the attack can happen to them, or what can happen if I click on this link? My curiosity has got me opening in this email, and we end up with some type of vulnerability, exploitation, infiltration, and potentially an incident or a breach. We are the ones that are at fault the most for the cybersecurity problems that we have today. And Zero Trust is a methodology to make sure that what we do is correct, and if something we do is bad, is caught early on. It's about containment. Operating in a bubble so that if something bad happens, you as a human do something bad, it's contained, it's controllable, it's remediatable, but we don't have that lateral movement and spread to other resources. And if you look at the guidance from NIST and many of the other papers that are out there, it's not about stopping. It's about control and containment of an authorized activity, so if something bad happens, it doesn't get worse moving outwards. Now, the challenges with doing this outside of the network really are here. We've already highlighted how humans are the weakest links. That's our remote workers, our remote employees. But we also have concepts like BYOC, bring your own cloud. It's very easy for anybody outside of the office to say, I love this SaaS solution. I love this social media piece. I think this little tool on the internet can help me do something. And the end user signs up with it. with or without the organization's approval. What's needed is nothing. It's just a website. Unless that website is blocked and you're doing all the work in the web, it's just a browser connection. That's really all it is. Now, what the end user pushes there in terms of data, resources, information may be subjected to DLP policies, but bring your own cloud is a real risk, especially if they're not using their own work IDs, they're using personal IDs, and you have no control of what goes on in that bring your own cloud situation. This also is true for bring your own device. I'm using my home computer for work information, and then insider threats. That's not only the insiders that go rogue, but an insider that's compromised unwillingly and becoming a conduit or a vessel for a threat actor externally. Those are the biggest challenges with the perimeter being dissolved. But I will highlight, as I've done, bring your own cloud is an emerging one because people want to make their job simple, and whether that is through generative AI or a tool to help them build a PowerPoint presentation and they upload a script, don't realize the risks of that data getting out as they use something like Gamma or ChatGPT or another tool to just say, here's my outline, build me a PowerPoint, and now everything they put in that outline is pretty much in public domain. Now, the concepts of zero trust can apply to any role and privilege within an organization. If we were to go back 10, 15 years ago, we would think of the concept of a privileged account being only root administrator to an operating system, database, or an application. That's not necessarily true anymore. We have stewards of admin rights across the enterprise, not only from third-party vendors doing maintenance, looking at systems, checking for updates, checking for faults, to someone running the social media account for an organization. They are the admin for that social media. There are admins and admin types completely throughout an organization because privileges exist in a wide variety of ways. This brings up the very interesting question is, what is a privileged account today? And we could argue that it is anybody that has access to alter, copy, delete, create, or anything else, and that's virtually anybody, even a standard user. So privileges can exist throughout an environment in a wide variety of forms. The question becomes is, what is the risk? What is the risk of someone doing something bad with the access they have? And that is something that Zero Trust does identify and have controls for. By definition, in terms of 800-207, Zero Trust is an evolving set of cybersecurity paradigms, models, controls, and frameworks that move cyber defenses from the static on-premise networks that we used to have 5, 10, prior to COVID years ago, and moves that to the outside, on the internet, from home, work from anywhere, focusing on the users, assets, and resources for identity confidence, verification, and user behavior. Oh, wow, too fast. Let's go back up a little bit. Now, within NIST's seven tenets of Zero Trust, you have these high-level concepts, and I'll leave these to you to read. I'm not going to go through these in detail. But the primary focus here is to say we're going to allow connectivity with an identity of trusted confidence, and we're going to monitor that identity throughout its session to make sure that everything that was done was appropriate with the least amount of privilege possible. This would be very similar to you creating a secondary account on your Windows or Mac as a standard user, not the admin that is granted when you boot up or create the operating system in the first place. And that what you do with that system is logged in detail to make sure you don't do something bad. And if you were to elevate rights, that prompt, that UAC prompt or that Mac prompt that says, do you want to do this, is monitored even more extensively to make sure that something bad does not happen. This follows the concepts of least privilege. This monitors the posture of the asset to make sure that all activity does not alter the asset or its data in an inappropriate way. These 7 concepts have that history that I spoke about in the beginning that go all the way back to early Rainbow books, all the way back to STIGs and CIS controls, to say these are the best practices to ensure a user is doing something appropriate when they connect to something and they do it within their role or responsibility. Now, if we break this down into a tighter definition, we're finding that we need to make sure that the authentication model for the end user is rock solid. because you can't rely on the physical security of the person getting into the office and sitting in front of the computer to be your front line. You have to have a high confidence, whether it's FIDO2, biometrics, etc., that person asking for an authentication to the system and then authorization to appropriate resources is who they say they are. The entitlements, the rights, the privileges, and everything below that are continuously checked, so that if any type of step-up authentication or anything that is outside of scope revalidates who they are versus assuming it's cached or they're just allowed to do it. The behavior of the identity is monitored. So on a daily basis, if they do these tasks, monthly basis, they do these tasks, it is within their realm. Anything that is being seen that is different is flagged and potentially audible or has automatic action to terminate. And you're not trusting the person alone just by being within a network or a geolocation. Just because they show up in the US or just because they show up in the office is not good enough to say, fine, I recognize that network. And then finally, multi-factor biometric step-up authentication for that identity confidence is key. You cannot do any of this with single factor. It just doesn't work. And if you're using insecure multi-factor authentication, something like a simple push notification or SMS, those are subjected to a wide variety of monitor attacks, from MFA fatigue to smishing attacks, etc. They should be completely discounted from this model. That's not the right way to do it. You have to use more modern techniques with biometrics, FIDO2, or other techniques to ensure that the authentication process from top to bottom is solid. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they consider zero trust is they go, I'm going to zero trust my environment. And that doesn't work. As we've just discussed, it's a matter of disciplines, authentication for a person, a role to do a job. It's actually based on workflows. When you say a zero trust workflow, you have to now elaborate on what it is. Is it for end user access to systems? Is it for a PCI environment for managing credit card transaction? Is it for the access to secure information? You take a workflow and discipline from end to end, no matter how you've built it out in the model that you see on the screen, and say, I'm going to take that model and enable it for zero trust. This is the number one mistake that we see as a vendor and as a security professional within every organization. You have mandates to do zero trust. However, you've not said what you're going to apply it to. Well, I have end users working everywhere. I want to make sure zero trust applies. That's great. So the connectivity of that end user to the assets of the organization, on-premise and cloud, is what you're going to enable for zero trust. It doesn't mean how someone does payroll. It doesn't mean how HR instantiates systems. It's for a discipline and workflow. And no matter where something starts and where something ends, that entire pipe and its surroundings is what you're going to target for your zero trust initiative. With that in mind, it's not going to be a product that does it. That's not how it works. Zero trust has got these 7 tenets, but the second biggest mistake people make is, I'm going to go buy a zero trust product. No product is going to manage the US Department of Defense 156 defined controls. They're just not. So what you need to do is say, I am going to enable this workflow within my organization. I understand the concepts of 7 tenets, but how am I going to audit, demonstrate, and measure that apply to my business? Outside of the DoD controls, I'm not aware of anybody else that has absolutely said behavioral monitoring, least privilege, access controls outside of this framework that has been written. So your best bet is to take this with the workflow and treat it just like any other audit, any other controls framework, and say, where am I have coverage? Where is my evidence for collection? And how can I demonstrate it? Workflow, demonstratable, evidence collection, treat it like an audit. They're key. So what happens, from my standpoint, as the CISO for a vendor, we decided to adopt zero trust. We decided to adopt it for our FedRAMP environment and our end user workflow. We took all of the controls on this sheet in the DoD document, turned it into a massive spreadsheet, and I'm happy to share this with everyone, and started filling it out like an audit. What level of compliance do we have? What product and tooling am I using? Any comments that are available from the team in terms of the readily available or data retention? And then on the bottom, the workflows themselves. In my case, I am doing those end user access. I am doing my FedRAMP environment. I could do a lot more workflows in terms of Zero Trust, but you have to first ask yourself, what does the Zero Trust imply to me? And how am I going to control and measure it? Now, my next steps in terms of a CISO's journey to Zero Trust is to take these controls and map them back to NIST 853. So when I go through my standard audits, I have many of these already pre-populated. In addition, the ones that I've answered no for, I'm able to ask my security teams and say, what do we want to do to improve? These areas we don't have coverage for. Is there a technology we can invest in? Is there a process change we can make? How can I do better? So I have a measurable way of internally going, I am Zero Trust certified, even though there is not such a thing yet. I am Zero Trust compliant. I am adhering to Zero Trust standards. I can map them back to the 7 tenets. I can use my own tooling and other solutions to help me get there. And it's an easy vehicle for someone to basically implement as a part of their own journey. Now, when you consider the products that it's going to take to get there, you have to first go through the theoretical. And this is the NIST 1835 document. I have a piece of technology, BeyondTrust, Okta, SailPoint, Ping, whatever you may be using. How is it architected in my environment? Well, it has a control plane, it has a data plane, it has a policy engine. Is it properly implemented in my environment to honestly allow me to enable Zero Trust? All of these different vendors can be put in a variety of different ways, and if their architecture is not implemented correctly, you actually violate some of the initial tenets by design. You're not separating how someone has access or how someone is controlled or monitored, etc. So first understand the definitions, the terms on the left. Play buzzword bingo if you want. Learn what these mean and communicate them out to the environment so that the architecture environment know what each one means and how your current solutions are implemented. Then decide on your models. The NIST documentation clearly defines these 3 models for gateway access, resource portal, and enclave management. You don't have to be incredibly strict, but you have to be saying, I got mainframes. You know what? I have to treat that like an enclave gateway model. I have a PCI environment because I do process credit cards in my agency. I will use a gateway model to implement Zero Trust. I'm allowing remote workers all the time. I'm going to use that device agent gateway model. And that's what we did internally. Because I have people working remotely, completely independent. I don't give them VPN or anything else, but I want to monitor the behavior, their access, control SaaS applications, file transfers, everything. And that's how I do it. The top level model defined by NIST helps you understand which workflows it'll go to. Now you have the terminology, and now you're left selecting the products that will help you. Once you do that, the benefits are quite profound. You're going to find everything from malware decreases to incidents go down to rogue network access is virtually eliminated. The benefits are everything that Zero Trust touts it to be, but you're probably going to find some more that you didn't expect. You're going to find that if you do it correctly, your policies will have to change to stopping even allowing BYOD to connect to resources. It's not supposed to happen. You can't trust that asset. That's part of the tenants. Therefore, the asset has to be controlled by the organization. Therefore, you will stop allowing BYOD access. It's just a natural progression in the maturity of Zero Trust that will have better benefits for your overall security. So how do you get started within your organization? I'm giving you a lot of clues already. Let's recap it. First, visit 1835. Look at the different vendors that have been sampled in there as to their architectures. Now, in fairness, BeyondTrust did not participate in that document, but we have crafted our own internal architectures to match the 835 style mapping to enclave, mapping to agent, so that you could use our technology to meet those controls for least privilege, for behavioral monitoring, etc. Once you've got an idea of what you have or what the vendor can do in terms of architecture mapping, wait for the slide. Sorry about that. Then you want to consider your foundational pillars. You want to think about who the identity is, which devices will participate in this architecture, what networks may the communications traverse in the cloud or on-premise that are secured or not secured. Those networks are going to be important because if they have to go through something on-premise still, you're going to have to secure that network as a part of the end-to-end infrastructure, and then ultimately the data itself. Because what you want to do is get visibility into everything they're doing and ensure the communication paths end-to-end are fully secured. Then you'll end with the CISA Zero Trust Maturity Model. This is going to help you understand everything from design, from a traditional implementation, all the way through optimal, how far you've actually gotten those controls from the DoD, how you're measuring them, what tooling you're using through it. So you can say, I got my architecture, I started doing my audit, how far along am I? Remember, I said certified or compatible, etc. This, for government agencies, helps you get to that maturity level that you can actually demonstrate back to any auditing agency or your management. It's key, because fundamentally many of these concepts do involve privileged access management. That is the core of BeyondTrust's identity security solutions. And when you think about how we can get there in terms of products, it's everything from password management to remote support to remote access technologies for vendors and employees, making sure that you do not have directory stores that are different for Unix and Linux, consolidating them into Azure AD or AD, having least privilege for Unix, Linux, Windows, and Mac by removing all admin rights and using that policy agent and gateway model to ensure only the programs run with the privileges needed and are fully monitored at all time. These are fundamentally key to the 7 tenets. And when you look at the technology stack applied, it easily matches the architectures that I've been talking about. Now, to go one step further, as I stated in the beginning, BeyondTrust uses all of the technology that we make as a part of our operations. Yes, we are an Okta shop, we use CrowdStrike, a wide variety of others, but when we went through that control matrix from the DoD, many of the answers came from our own products. Now, you don't buy a Zero Trust product. I can only emphasize that. A company that says we make Zero Trust solutions is not thinking the right way. It's how you actually go through that audit and control list and say, this is what I'm using, and here's the evidence to produce it. Well, this is how we use our own products internally and how we can demonstrate them to you when properly architected in your environment and help meet the DoD requirements. Again, something that's demonstrable. With that, I want to thank you all for your time on a CISO's journey. If you have any questions on how we've enabled Zero Trust internally or how we can assist in your environment, please feel free to stop by to the booth or speak to me afterwards. Thank you.